Before we get into today's episode, I just wanted to tell you guys about PicDrop. PicDrop is an image transfer tool I've been using personally for about 5 years now. I use it for sending all my files to my clients. I can organize all my files online, create custom folders and galleries for clients where they can download and even like rate the photos, write notes, and just kind of streamline my workflow where I can just access all my files online. I can access it on my computer or my mobile phone on the go if I'm looking to download something to post. But just really great platform that was actually designed by photographers for photographers in mind. So they really understand what photographers need when delivering photos to clients and are continually updating the platform with new features. Like they have a new scribble tool. So if you're working with a retoucher or your client, they can write notes on the photo and just an easy way to communicate. But like I said, I've been using this platform for over 5 years now personally for all my own personal work and client work. So can't recommend it enough. And with today's episode, if you enter the promo code BANTER when you sign up at pickdrop.com, you'll get 2 months free of PicDrop. So definitely go check it out and let me know what you guys think. All you got to do is enter BANTER at pickdrop.com and you'll get 2 months free. Welcome back to the Photo Banter podcast. I'm your host, Alex Gagne, and on today's podcast, I welcome on photographer and director Jacob Rosenberg. In this interview, I speak to Jacob about his new book titled Right Before My Eyes, a collection of images from 1988 to 1998. The book showcases photos of Jacob's early days as a filmmaker for Plan B Skateboards, where he made both the iconic questionable and virtual reality skateboard videos. And the book also features photos that Jacob took during his time documenting the rap collective known as the Hieroglyphics. And I also speak to Jacob about his journey to becoming a working filmmaker, having directed commercials featuring Lebron James, Quincy Jones, Snoop Dogg, as well as directing his full-length documentary titled Waiting for Lightning, an intimate portrait of the legendary pro skateboarder Danny Way as he attempted to jump the Great Wall of China on a skateboard. I was excited to have Jacob on the podcast to discuss his new book, but also his incredible career in filmmaking. So I hope you guys enjoy, and thanks for listening. And if you're interested in grabbing a copy of Jacob's book, you can click the link in the show notes of this episode. And I'm also going to be raffling a copy of his book off on the Photo Banter Instagram page coming up soon. So keep an eye out for that. But yeah, if you want a copy, just click that link, and hope you guys enjoy this episode. All right, and now welcome on Jacob Rosenberg. Excited to have you, man. You got a new book out. It's coming out November 14th is what the pre-order that's coming out.
Yep, pre-order will be like around the 12th or 14th. Yeah, and then a
It's
show at Heavyweight on the 22nd
and
in
it's
LA.
called Right Before My Eyes. It's a body of work from 1988 to 1998.
Yeah,
When did you kind of decide you want to make this book, and what was kind of your goal with putting this thing together?
it's funny, you obviously know Greg Hunt and his work and his Jason Dill book, but Greg Hunt and I were hiking Runyon Canyon like 2 years or 3 years before the Dill book even came out, and we were both talking about our history and wanting to catalog things. And he was like, "I have this idea for this book on Dill," and I was, I mean, I revere Greg and his artwork and his voice as an artist. And I was like, yeah, I feel like I have a couple books in me as well. Like I really want to kind of capture this time in my life, but I don't know what. I'm so precious, we're so precious about our history. And and then, 2 years later, he comes out with his Dill book. I buy it. I'm just like, fuck, this is so good. And then he comes out with another book, and I'm like, fuck, this is so good. And I would say in 2022, I started to be like, all right, I need to get my shit together. I'd started collecting images and like looking at my skateboarding work and then looking at my work with hieroglyphics. And then, you know, I would say in late, I think it was like 22, 23, I talked to Greg and I'm like, hey, would you be down to edit this book? And he, unequivocally was like 1,000,000%. And so I started sending him some images and he just started tripping out on the images. He's like, these are crazy. And then I started sharing some artifacts and stuff. He's like, how the fuck do you have all this stuff? And that's just me. And then it just sort of started to come to life, and I just felt the urgency of finishing it. I feel like as creative people, we're so intoxicated by the idea of things, and especially if you're a photographer or a filmmaker and you have this body of work and you're trying to finish something, you're just like, I just want to get it done. Sometimes the process of talking about it like satiates that desire, and then you go back and you hibernate for a little bit. So I hibernated for a long time, and then we hit this point where I think we understood what the beginning of the book was. And he really laboriously, I kind of collected all these images from 88, 89, 90, 91, 92, like kind of 93-ish to kind of virtual from like my origins. And he just culled it down into like the essential bits. And then it was like, okay, I don't think this is my solely skateboarding book. I think this is the book where we tell the story of how this took me from this moment, to Hawaii to make this music video, which is sort of my beginning as a filmmaker, truly.
And the thing, I mean, maybe I'm stupid, but I've obviously known your work as a filmmaker. You've done like the great documentary with like, Danny Way and all the cool
Yeah,
commercial work you do now and
yeah,
storytelling, and then obviously with skateboarding. I didn't realize you shot still photos that much. So I don't know if other people knew you
yeah,
had this body of work sitting around. But
yeah.
was still photography something that you did a lot of back then and kind of still do now, or?
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting story because, I was really, I mean, the simple narrative is I went to skate camp in 1988. I brought my still camera. I photographed all the pros. I'd always had a camera around me in my childhood. My father took photos all the time. So it was very comfortable. We'd have slideshows after family vacations. So like the camera in my hand was really normal. I had a friend named David Tullis, really talented, creative person. He was like filming and taking photos, making zines in Palo Alto. But at that skate camp, I met Ryan Monahan and I took all these photos. And then I just kept taking photos of pros. And the thing that happened that sort of propelled all of my documentation and body of work was that Ryan went to Europe. And when he came back, he had a relationship with a French skateboard magazine called No Way Magazine. And this is 1989. So I'm 16. And he comes back and he says, Hey, No Way Magazine wants to do a profile on Stephanie Pearson, who is a female skateboarder, really sweetheart, real great woman. And Ryan's like, Hey, you should take the photos. And I'm like 16 years old, not talented at all. And I shot photos for her checkout. And I shipped the photos to France. They get published. I make like $1,500 for
Wow.
like, three photographs, two like full page photos, some small photos. And basically, I kind of said to the guy in France, his name is Jeff Lubrano. I was like, "Hey, if you want me to do this again, I could like I could
I'm
interview
available
anybody,
tomorrow.
1,000,000%." So what it did was it was like it created this notion of me having a reason for engaging with skaters I admired. So I then go and start shooting everything in front of me, and ultimately, like I end up shooting the amateur finals in Reno in 1990. And that's kind of, I think, one of the biggest moments in skateboarding in terms of like all the AMs who would define the 90s were there in that contest. You have Costin, Javante, Rick, Mike, Markovich, Dwayne Petrie, Rob Dyrdek. Everyone is skating in that contest. Lance Conklin, right? Guy and Rudy. And I cover it for the magazine. And then I get the magazine and I send it, mail it out to everyone who got a photo that I took. And in this same window of time, I'm going to contests, I'm taking photos of people, I'm sending them pictures of the photos, I'm making little edits of them. So really what it was just like this collision of like having a purpose to shoot for this magazine. And then that just created this motivation. I think I shot for like 14 to 16 different issues. It turned into what was called Anyway magazine. And it basically supplemented my whole video career because I bought all my cameras from that.
So
So
still, so that's what I was gonna ask. So still photography before you got into filming.
it's kind of the same time
Yeah.
because, but the video technology didn't really pop off until like 1989, right? So 89, like that check that I got I used to buy a VCR that I could record tape to tape on without without static. But really, people from Europe, like Mackenzie Eisenhower or Fabrice Lamau, they're like, oh yeah, I grew up. Like, I know who Jake Rosenberg is, not from my videos, from my editorial and my photography. So I kind of like, I had like one ad in Transworld, Javante backlip slide at Brown Marble Benches for Vision Streetwear. And then I had nothing in an American magazine until Big Brother.
Wow.
And and then even after that, like I shot a lot of Plan B ads, but I always had that and I always had my camera around and I was always interested in the skaters as people. So I think a lot of my photography there's a lot of that in the book, but even the stuff that's still in my archive that I'll include some of that in the show, it's not skating,
Yeah,
you know.
the thing it's a really amazing book. The like I told you when
Mm,
we were setting this up, the quality it's incredible. But the thing I really took away from the book that I really enjoyed, it's not just your photos of like the pro skaters everyone knows like Mike Carroll or the
mm,
hieroglyphics and whatnot. Um, it's you, and it's like
yeah,
it's you're in it. Like there's photos of
yeah.
you, and the one page that I enjoyed the most was your personal statement to I think it was like a
Mm,
letter to get into Emerson College.
yeah, yeah,
And you can this in the in the letter you can just feel the excitement of like a young
yeah,
artist. And
yeah.
there's one quote at the end. I was just like it was like I know I will succeed. I was like, and the thing I was gonna add, like, did you always just have that belief in yourself as like a, because in this pursuing any
Yeah.
creative endeavor is you got to have belief in yourself. But it's just reading that letter, you always kind of felt that way.
I mean, it's an interesting thing. I love that you tracked that because that letter came late in the process of the book when I was trying to find a transition between Plan B and Hyro, like truly where it like really pivots and there's no more skateboarding. And there, I did do some of the 411 parts when I was in Boston, but I found that letter amongst all these other things that I kept from college. And there's like a brash confidence that I think is innately in me. I think I think when I was really young, I was annoying, and I was very eager. But my parents encouraged me, and then I met mentors and other figures who really encouraged me. And I think what I learned in life and what my dad always said is he's like the worst question is the one you don't ask. And if you ask someone for something, the worst thing they can say is no. So there was sort of like always, I just learned like fuck it, like I can do these things, like you know, and obviously, like I'm a privileged kid, white kid growing up in middle class Palo Alto in the 70s and 80s. Like I had opportunities, or it felt like, I did, and then I could say, hey, I want to do this. But I think what it was is I was relentless. Like if that guy Jeff Lubrano in France, like if I faxed him and was like, hey, I want to do something more for the magazine, and he didn't respond, I'd fax him again. If I shot Guy and Rudy, I would send them a letter with like 30 prints, and they would get a letter in the mail and they'd be like, this kid sent me these 30. So I was like, well, I know these things are going to happen because I think, so much in life, you're not conscious of it at all. There's an unconsciousness in that era for me, which is one of the aspects I love about the book because you can kind of see how this life begins to take shape. But when you look back, you're just like, I just had, I think, an overwhelming life force. And I believe part of that is, due to trauma that I was able to like harness towards personal strength and just a, a hope. I mean, this moment in time is tough, but I do have these feelings of hope. And I just always felt like, fuck it, why not?
Yeah, and like I said, the thing that I really enjoyed about the book is it was like obviously, yeah, the documentation of these really amazing artists and skateboarders, but it was really this like the journey as an artist from when you start to like what you're
Mm,
doing now and the
mm,
evolution, and even
yeah.
like doing the deep dive of your like some of your films, like the Riding Lightning, and then the stuff you're doing now. It's like
Yeah.
the quality and the storytelling is just gotten sharper and sharper.
Thank you.
And it seems like as an artist, you feel like you're just continually learning and like pushing yourself because I can just see it from the work and seeing where you're even the stuff the Danny Way documentary was like what was that 2012?
2012. Yeah, Waiting
Yeah.
for Lightning was
So
then.
the
Yeah.
seeing your work from there to now is like pretty incredible.
Thank you.
Um, but yeah, you feel like you're still just like learning as an artist even now at
I,
this
I mean,
point.
I think you're. I think that's why the work strengthens is because I'm not interested in not learning. I think that I had a really incredible close friend named Leon. He's on the pictures behind me, there and
Yeah.
there. And Leon was an incredible actor and film worker. And, he was just always about presence. And he always felt like you could learn from something, never walked out of a movie, never, even if a movie was bad, he always felt like there was something there to extract. And I think that if you leave your eyes open, there's so much to learn and so much to take in. I think a lot of intent in artistry is invisible because it's subconscious, right? What you're chasing, right? Like, what does my book communicate on a subconscious level? I think it communicates eagerness. I think there's this kid that wanted to be inside of that moment. And, I wanted to have the camera on my shoulder. But I think that the other thing is you got to get the reps and you got to surround yourself with incredible collaborators. So on Waiting for Lightning, I had two extraordinary people. I had, my editor Carol Martori, whose husband Yogi Proctor comes from skateboarding, and then I had my writer Brett Anthony Johnston. And so both of those people were talking about storylines and story arcs and where to put things in the film. And we watched a movie called Man on Wire, which has a 5 act structure that sort of begins with a heist, right? In Man on Wire, it's about the guy that walks between the World Trade Centers. And the opening first act is a tease of the heist. And then you sort of build and tell the story for the next 3 acts. And then the last act is the heist itself. Well, Danny like totally hijacked the Great Wall of China and China. So we abided by that structure. So part of it is in terms of refining your voice as an artist is collaborators and looking at other work for inspiration and answers. So for me, you're not trying to copy something, but you're trying to intuitively like understand what that thing is communicating to you. And then you really need to learn how to develop your reaction to things. With the book, I had Greg. Um, and I also had my art director, Alexander Hansford, who just as an aesthetic guy, like he's so responsible for the look and feel and texture and like quality of the book. But with Greg, it was like initially the book, because I'm so verbal and I talk to people, I love doing interviews, there was going to be like segments of text the whole time to actually tell you the story. And then we got this like first section done and it really didn't need any words. And then I was like, fuck, how do I finish the book without any words? And then that's when I found the college admission letter. And if you read that letter, it actually tells the story of what happened before. And then it tells the story of what I'm on the precipice of. And then the notebooks and the journals from
Or
Hawaii.
I love the receipt from I don't know if you bought a camera or rented it from like
No, we read that's the rental receipt. Yeah.
which was
Like that's
wild.
all the
Even back then,
gear.
it was like almost $3,000 back in
Oh,
that. It was
hell yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot of fucking money.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. Yeah.
but all
Yeah. I
those
mean,
details where it's just like you, I would imagine back then that was like a big deal probably for you to like rent that camera. Like,
dude, it was like an SR2, and it was like, and I had no camera assistant. I loaded the film myself. I did it all myself. One of my favorite photos in the book is me in the Dole pineapple field with Opio, and I'm holding the camera on my shoulder, and it's like I just look like I'm really in my element. But with the storytelling, I think it's collaborators, and it's really paying attention, and I think you can develop a sense of story, and from an early age, like I have tape recordings of me like list talking about the story of Star Wars as a 4-year-old kid to my dad. He's like, Jacob, what is this movie about? And I answer that. So I think innately that dialogue of story and narrative was always in my bones.
and I guess What made you want to bring Greg on to help with the edit and is like working with like editors? Obviously, you work with editors on your filmmaking, but with the
Yeah.
still photography, what made you want to bring on Greg and have that collaboration and putting it together?
I mean, first of all, I don't trust myself to finish it if I'm doing it completely alone. I really don't. I am so emotionally tied to that era for a number of reasons that are obvious and not obvious. And so I also I'll qualify this by saying like I hate it when people say I'm not good. I wasn't a good photographer. The humble like, oh, I wasn't that good. Like I think I made very good photos looking back on them, but at the time they didn't measure up against other people that I was looking at. But I understand that my rawness and my age like was like, whoa, these photos feel very different than other people's photos from that era. But I didn't trust myself to be able to know what was a good photo in terms of the storytelling. So I trust Greg implicitly as an artist and curator and editor. So I would basically I created these subfolders on our sort of master folder, and I would just populate it with all these photos that were prints and scans and this. And my job was basically to just collect everything. And then I'd find artifacts and ephemera. And he would be like, oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. That's interesting. And then he would like rough out a section and then I'd respond and we'd look at it together. And then, he would go back to work and be busy for a couple months and then I would be busy. And then, then I had this really weird moment in time where I wasn't working and this museum exhibit in New York. And then the book was like, okay, I got to fucking do this. And Greg wasn't really available at that time. So I just vomited, too many images and crafted this narrative. And then we finally sat together. We just stripped it all back and it was like perfect. But his sense of, he'll look at a photo and he'll be like, that photo's crazy. And I'm like, great. Like the photo of my steering wheel with my hands on the wheel.
Yeah, that was
Like
great. I loved
it's
it too. Yeah.
because the Venture sticker, it's a Volvo. It's like of the era. And there's like four other photos in that sequence. But he was like, that's great. And then the Spencer Fujimoto, asleep in the car, no seatbelt. Like, you know, um, I just really trust his taste. And also as a man, a father, a friend, and when I say man, I mean human. um, I just really admire him deeply and just felt more like I was honored, but I was also like, okay, this dude's gonna like challenge me.
Yeah. And the one thing, obviously, looking at your work, where you started from working in skateboarding and everything, now you're doing like big production stuff and making films with skateboarding and then the hieroglyphic stuff. It's just you.
Yeah.
It's just you and a camera, and it's you and editing. And now, like I was looking at, you did a really cool documentary, and I'll link it when I post this. You did a really cool film. I think it was just a personal project on this magician, Franco
Yeah. Yeah.
Pascali.
Yeah.
Really
Yeah. Yeah.
great film. But with
Yeah.
that film, there's like you can see the credits. It's like production, sound editors, visual, like all this stuff. And I think a lot of times when people start off as filmmakers,
hmm
you're just starting by yourself. And then they
Yeah.
look at where you're at now doing commercials with LeBron and really cool stuff.
Yeah.
How do you get to the point where like you start from working by yourself and then working with the team? And was that a challenge going from being this so individual as a creator to working as a team? Or does it kind of gradually build over time on the type of projects you're working?
I think it definitely builds over time. With the Franco project, there's like, really three key collaborators, four if you consider the composer who wrote the music, which was really powerful. But Chris Amos was my editor, and Logan Triplett was my DP. Now Logan comes from skateboarding. I befriended Franco, met him when he was like 18, and I immediately like I say this very delicately, but he's like the Dylan Reader of magic. Like he's very much very confident in himself and his style, and his skills are extraordinary. Now, I will say that my book editor is in that short film with Franco at the pool table. He's one of the guys there because my book, no, sorry, not book editor, book designer, Alexander Hansford, the guy that did the art direction for the book, because he makes magic books. So Franco, I felt this immediate attraction to, like he was a street skater. Like I felt like he was like, and then and I had been shooting some work that was very on the verge of having this cinematic quality that I was excited about. And Logan Triplett, who is a skater from Montana, is friends of another friend who I met like years before when they were interviewing me around Waiting for Lightning. Logan's aesthetic work is like crazy good. So I basically asked him, like, hey, would you be willing to shoot this spec magic thing with me? And I want to shoot it super cinematic and like a verite documentary, but with real quality to it. And he was all in. And it was kind of like a skate shoot. And we just did it. So that's that film. So it was really bootstrapping. But again, the theme here is collaborators and finding the people whose aesthetics and whose taste helps you narrow on yours. And but when it comes to developing the career and getting out of that like do it yourself thing, I mean, I feel like, I mean, what did they call it? Like self-employed? Like I feel like fuck, man, I was so and have been so fatigued by self-employment tax and all this stuff for years and years and years. Like, oh my God, I didn't start a corporation until, I was in my 40s, and then, the money went there and I pay myself salary and, you know, and hope to stay busy. But like it is a challenge over time. And I think the thing for me that's been a struggle is I've never had like an outside advocate who's like helping completely develop my career. And part of that is because I have like a goal straight ahead of me, and I got to achieve that goal, and I'm like intimidated by like, oh, I'm going to go all in on trying to make a TV show. Oh, I'm going to go all in on making a film. I just feel like, oh my God, I'm going to spiral and maybe I can't. And I will, but it's got to be the right pathway in. But I think I always feel, I mean, I don't want to say it in that way, but I always feel alone in the process. I think that's like a really normal feeling as an artist. And, you know, I don't feel outside pressure. I feel inner pressure. I've really, I've been posting raw footage, and I would post outtakes from my archive, and I have absolutely insane, very innocent photos of all these people who've kind of defined this era. But I'm like, I don't know. I don't know the right way to say it. I don't know the right way to do it. I don't know. Like, what do I really want to say? And sometimes you just got to start it and then find the right collaborator. And I think that my enthusiasm, right? Like I'm going to succeed, that idea, the enthusiasm is what helps you find people to, to be on your train and help you generate that momentum.
And you say like the inner pressure. What is that pressure? Is it just to?
I mean, I just feel like, you know, why haven't you done it? Why haven't I made a book before? Like I really legitimately feel that. I feel like I have this like really rich body of work that no one's really seen, and I share it here and there, and I'll send text to, like, I have a handful of people who like for your eyes only. And then like I'll, because I want to say, like, Bill Strobeck is like doing something and I just send him raw footage or send him photos that no one else has seen because I feel I want to share them. So I have this innate feeling of wanting to share it, but then I have this self-criticism of like it has to be right.
Mhm.
It's got to be right. And that's a little bit of a challenge because I sort of care about the storytelling of it. So the self curation is really a big deal. It's got to be premium. And I also understand as you get older that takes time. Nothing is fast, nothing at all. And so I think when you understand that if you chip away, like it it will happen, and that thing will refine. If you think of a sculpture from marble, right? Like it could take years to create the smoothness of the texture that you're after at the level of depth that you need to get to. But when you start, it's just this marble block and you have to work in. So I think it's just patience and self compassion.
Yeah, I think it's a
you
thing
know?
a lot of photographers and artists probably struggle with. I know they do is like, I'm not ready to show my portfolio. I'm not ready to show this
Yeah,
project. And it's like, I think at least the thing I learned is like, yeah, nothing's ever like perfect, and it's all like building blocks, like we were talking about. Like the film you
yeah,
did 12 years ago, if you do
yeah.
that film now, I'm sure you would have approached
Oh
it
my God. Oh my
differently.
God.
So
Yeah,
it's just
yeah,
like, yeah,
yeah.
it's hard to put yourself out there, but it's at least for me knowing like this is for life. Like I'm doing
Yes.
photography for life, and
Yeah,
this same thing with you. You're going to be doing filmmaking probably forever, and it's
yeah.
just and the you probably I would imagine you probably learned a lot putting this book together.
Oh my God.
So if you
Yeah,
do another one, it's just refine, refine, refine. Like,
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think that the one thing about age that's really beautiful, because what you're talking about is reflection and understanding time.
hmm
Time is like the most elusive, challenging, incredible companion that we have in the journey of life. And part of the challenge for me, and it's been I've accepted it in the process of making the book, is like embracing the idea that I'm not ready for something, and then saying honestly to myself, now is the time. Because I think like the story that I made on Danny at that time was really important for me to refine my storytelling, my structural awareness, creating entertainment and intellectual depth. And it was like a tribute to Mike Chernasky and what I saw in the power of skateboarding with healing. But if I did that movie today, it would be very different. It would be more personal to me. Um, and that's not good or bad, but I think that you need to find a way to be present with yourself to know the moment that you're in. And when you feel that thing in the back of your head like going like, hey dude, you got to start chipping away. Like, I just started. I made the Dropbox folder. I made the full. I have whiteboards all around. I'm like, here's the eras. Here's the thing. Here's the this. This is the chapter. This is the chapter. This is the chapter. Okay, and then you start.
yeah, you just build.
And then it
And
takes 2 years. I mean, this is legit. I mean, not to say this is a 10-year project, but like I I I started capturing and digitizing everything that I have in my archive in 2010 when I was working on Waiting for Lightning, because we were trying to see what all the archive that I had. So this is the 14-year process to get to the point, and then it's probably been legitimately like 2-ish years to really make the book.
and for you to like have the time to sit down and go through your archive of all these photos from like this being like a kid, like in some
Yeah,
of it like a
yeah,
teenager,
yeah.
like how was that experience for you? And I guess like is there anything you like hope people would take away from the book, like looking out at this body of work?
I mean, I have such complicated feelings looking back on that time, and they're not complicated in a negative way.
hmm
They're complicated in a way where I feel like I'm still trying to understand that kid. And I'm also still trying to like draft off of his energy and momentum and eagerness, you know? Um, so when I see these photos, and it's like everything has been so curated in the book, to aim to be as expressive as possible for that moment. But like, there's rolls and rolls and rolls and rolls and prints and prints and prints and prints. And I just see this like enthusiasm that nothing else mattered in my life except music and skateboarding. Like all the tapes I have, all the photos, all the film. So part of it is really, I think you learn how to sort of embrace that old part of yourself, and then I try to look at what the story is and what those critical moments were, and there's like a really critical moment with my childhood friend David Tullis, where he was making zines and we were around Palo Alto Sport Shop, and Christian Cooper worked at Sport Shop and Gary Hall ran it. And then he went and started, another skateboard shop in Palo Alto. And I got my camera in my hand and I started filming all these people. And, you know, the I was just like, how can I be in this? So I think like, the process of going through that was really looking at passion, youthful passion. Um, and also being, sensitive to my insecurities at the time. I really wanted to be liked.
Mm.
I think skateboarders universally don't feel comfortable in like the large group of the public for whatever reason. I think at that time, most of us had trauma and really were felt displaced. And skateboarding offered this like very protective shell of like, it was an echo chamber around people who we knew understood how we felt. And we were getting kicked out and we were getting yelled at and we were getting threatened and people were fighting with us, so it really invigorated us to stay inside of that.
And was it cause you came up in an era like there's photos in the book from EMB, which is a popular skate spot in San
Yeah,
Francisco back in the day.
yeah,
And
yeah,
I never really got to skate there like because they tore it down or whatever, but as someone who grew up on the East Coast, everything you heard about EMB, it was this like real rough and tough.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
you show up and it's like they might steal your board, someone might try to mess
Mm-hmm.
with you. As
Yeah.
a kid who's around like some of the best skaters in the world, like Mike Carroll and all these
Mm.
incredible skaters, was it intimidating for you trying to show up there and start shooting photos and filming, or like?
I mean, I wish I had an interesting story to say, like, oh my God, Baba. It was like the first time I was at EMB, I was filming or taking photos. So I had a purpose to be there.
Hmm.
And, again, like my timing and my era and like the projects that I was involved in through the people, I go and, film Rick Ibiseta for Useless Wooden Toys, and Javante's with him when we're filming. So I'm filming Javante too, and that some of that footage makes it into the Planet Earth video. And then I meet, Guy and Rudy, and I'm invited to LA and to film for video days. And then they come, through Palo Alto and they stay at my house, and then these videos come out and my name's in the credit. So skaters are seeing like that. Oh, that's the guy whose name is in the credit, and I'm not like some old weird dude who's like on rollerblades filming, which was a thing at the time. I'm like, oh, I'm your age. I might be annoying, but I'm still like, and I'm like relentless. And I send you a tape after. So my experience of EMB was like I was immediately there. I'm shooting photos, and like legitimately, like I was already filming Mike Carroll a lot, but he goes pro in '91. And I'm like, hey, why don't we do a pro checkout for this French magazine I work for? He's like, great. So he gets a pro checkout and I shoot all the photos,
Yeah.
like, so he's immediately feeling like, oh, this kid is actually like doing cool things for me, So I, take photos of Kelch. Kelch gets a photo and, the magazine, or, Wingding gets a photo when I'm covering San Francisco. So immediately I had a purpose when I was there, so I just never experienced any of that stuff. And more than anything, like like James stood up for me a number of times, you know but ultimately I have, probably me and Mesa have like the lion's share of core EMB era footage,
Yeah.
and it's just it's I mean it's endless.
Yeah, it's incredible the photos. Yeah, seeing Mesa as like a young kid in one of the photos, like sitting in the background and
I
stuff.
mean
And
that photo's amazing. That's from the 8th Street demo day. There's a lot of stories about that day. I've thought about like, oh, do I just do an EMB book and it's just EMB photos? Because I have enough, and they're really like weird photos. Like there are tons of landscape photos and not that many people are shooting landscapes of EMB. They're just there to get the trick.
yeah, that's what I kicked myself because I started shooting skate photography in Boston. That's how I started
Yeah,
photography, and that's all I really have photos of is just the
yeah,
tricks. Because I was just
yeah,
all I looked at was like Thrasher and Trans World and these
yeah.
magazines. But
Of
so that's
course.
what it's amazing that you had that you I don't know you just have all these amazing photos of like just the
I
places
mean
and the
that
people.
the
Yeah,
the photo that's in there, in the book, right? That one with the ferry building in the back and James wearing the 8th Street shirt. Again, I have no idea why I shot that, but on that roll of film, I have like 12 photographs walking around the plaza from like weird angles of it, you
and
know?
Were there any like photographers or people that you kind of looked up to early on, filmmakers, or even
All of them. I mean, it's like, where do you start? Luke Ogden was always like this elusive, like amazing photographer, right? All his shit was so good.
Mhm.
Gabe Morford felt more accessible. Luke was always very quiet. Gabe was quiet too. Tobin, his ability to be like inside some of that grime and rawness was incredible. So like those three guys were all older than me. I did not feel like I had an ability to connect with them because I felt like I was doing my video, and I really truly felt like I wasn't worthy because I'm like French skateboard magazine kid. And then Bryce, I was acquaintances with because I made the Dogtown video and I used a lot of his
Bryce
Bryce
Kanights.
Kanights.
Yeah.
Yeah. I made the Dogtown video and used a lot of his footage. So we were friendly and he was like, okay, that's Jake, you know? Um, but like guys like Kevin Thatcher and Mofo, like they felt like untouchable to me. And then, gosh, if you go to San Diego, Grant Britton is the god, Mickey Vukovic, these guys are incredible, Christian Klein, Jamie Mossberg. And then of course Dan Sturt does all this work, and Spike Jones had that rawness that I liked, so I'm probably forgetting some of those people at the time, but it was like I just didn't feel like I was in a conversation as a skate photographer. And that's why I think it's surprising when you see the body of work, because you're like, oh, you know, um,
I like that you utilize strobe a lot in the photos. It seemed like that was
yeah.
kind of a constant in how you photographed back then.
I mean, I had my son. I mean, here's the truth. I never like took a roll of film and practiced like my sun pack, shutter speed, and then flash speed. I never did that. So I have just photos that feel weird because they're never in sync the right way.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a whole roll from Reno where I was like Blayback, we became close friends later in life. He's like, yeah, you can't like shoot less than 1/500th of
Yeah.
skating to really like capture it crisp. I'm like, I don't think I ever shot 1/500th. Like, I think like the fastest was like, 1/25th. Like literally, I have a whole roll from Reno of street skating. It's all smeared because it's like a 60th.
Mm.
But some of those photos are really interesting now, because they say something. And to me, like the fact that I wasn't so refined is part of the authenticity of that for me. But Chris Ortiz, in the big picture, was the most generous photographer that I met. He really befriended me at skate camp, and he was the first photographer to show me a roll of film. He showed me a roll of film, I'll never forget it, of Eddie Elguera skating a pool. And the pool, like, I think had rocks on the lip, and there was like blue sky on the top. And it's just, and then I would be on the deck and he'd like kind of say, hey, stand there, or maybe you should, he was really friendly and like totally saw my enthusiasm and was like, this kid is not threatening. I'm going to do a good deed and be a cool dude. And no one else really did that for me because I was so young, and I don't know how they felt about me. And once you start filming for Plan B, everyone was cool with me. I mean, once I made the Think video and was so like dialed in with High Speed, with Dogtown and Venture and Think, they were cool with me, but like, or cool to me, but no one ever. I mean, I remember sneaking onto the deck at Raging Waters and like being vibed so hard, like, why the fuck are you here? Like,
Wow.
because basically, like, if you're there, you're potentially in the way of their photo, of
I
them getting the angle.
got it. Um, and w- w- one thing you in the beginning of the book, you give a big shout out, and I know he's been an influential person in your life, Mike Ternaski,
Yeah,
who founded Plan B.
yeah.
How important was he in your journey as an artist?
I mean, he's kind of the most important figure for me in my journey of being an artist because at a really early age, when I was 15, and I'm like this kid who's really troubled, you wouldn't really know if you saw me, but I think he knew. He had this ESP with kids who had trauma and were troubled. He just could pick up on kids who wanted to be liked, not for selfish reasons, but because they were missing something. So he kind of saw me at skate camp. I helped with Shackle Me Not, like kind of, carrying some stuff. And then they put a credit for me in the video, which was crazy. And I felt so important in that moment, like, wow. And then I stayed in touch with him, and I worked at the skate shop, and I went to ASR, and I was invited to the Hocus Pocus premiere, and was included in all these things. He stayed in touch with me. I started filming more. I started sharing footage with him. And eventually, I made the Dogtown video. I made the Think video. He used a ton of my footage for videos that he was making, like Planet Earth video. And, he saw the work that I was doing. And if you look at Mike's career, he has these collaborators, Sloshbach with Shackle, Mac Dog with Hocus Pocus, Dan Sturt with Not the New and the Life video. And I sort of, become a collaborator with him and Sloshbach on Questionable, and then it's just me and him on virtual reality. So he really made me feel like I was good at what I did. And when you have that, you sort of become liberated, right? So to draw a parallel with Greg Hunt, I was sort of looking for someone to tell me that my archive was worthy of a book. And I felt like Greg would be a good barometer, the best maybe, where he'd be like, no, that's not a good photo. This is a good photo. So in that way, that part of that collaborator that we seek, this is a little bit more self-serving, is like someone who validates the work so you don't self-doubt, right? So I'm working for Mike Chernasky, and he's like complimenting the way that I'm filming. And then he gives me a note, oh, get it like this. Or then he is critical, oh, you should have gotten a second angle, or you shouldn't have been long lens, or you should have gotten long lens.
He pushed
So
you.
he 100% pushed me, but in the same breath, he was like, that was great, Jake. He knew exactly how to sort of like, stick and carrot me. Um, and I think that, to keep our conversation fluid,
Hmm.
like you want to try to find collaborators who validate but also push you. And Mike like pushed me like nobody else, and it's hard too because uh, particularly when someone dies and they leave a void, you start to begin to project and fantasize about what that relationship was so that it can serve your ability to survive.
Hmm.
And so you mythologize it. um, but it was a really tough relationship, but it was like what I needed at that time. And I think it taught me how to do the work. I mean, we edited all the time, we filmed all the time, we were very critical about what we were doing. And particularly when we made virtual reality, we didn't ask anybody else. It was me and him like looking at each other like, is this good? I would string out an edit and I'd show him, and he'd be like, thumbs up or like start over. And legitimately, I'd have to start the part over if we weren't feeling it.
Yeah. And I know for myself and just talking to you, like having a community of other artists and people to, maybe it's just bounce ideas off, or maybe just
Yes.
like, commiserate with on like some job you lost or
Yeah.
whatever.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of important to you, even at this point in your career, just like having a community of other people to kind of bounce ideas off or just talk to.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, I think community is everything, Stefan Van Asco was like, that was my dude when I was making the book,
Hmm.
because he's a photographer I revere. I think he has great taste. And I think he understands the essence of making photos and expressing something with photographs. And he helped me pre-scan and pre-shoot all these things. I'm sending him so many like for your eyes only,
Yeah.
texts. But like, Stefan was like a really essential part of my community on this project. And then he is going through something and he reaches out to me and I'm like, I'm honored. Like hey man, if I can ever support you,
Mm-hmm.
how can I help you? So I think that the secret, not the secret, the balance is like being open enough so that the relationships aren't just self-serving to your moment. Balance is like the hardest thing in the world because as artists, we like have to keep pushing forward. And sometimes we get stuck. And sometimes being stuck, we kind of have to figure out by ourselves. And sometimes we need to go someplace else to pull ourselves out of it. But I think, the energy that you get, and it is very delicate because you could talk about something too much to the point where you don't feel like you need to do it. And I've been dangerously in that territory. I have one project in my life right now that I've been overlooking for the last 3 or 4 years, and I feel terrible about it.
Mm.
But there's like a subconscious part of me that's like I don't know the answer, so I'm not ready. I gotta finish my book, and maybe I was right. And there's no choice whether I was right or not. I finished my book,
You ever have a
but I
pro
did.
You ever have a project you started and just didn't finish? Like you just went into it with something and then it just kind of fizzled or I know I've had that with photo projects
Yeah,
before where it's like I even shot it and then it was just like wasn't what I thought it was gonna be.
I
Like,
mean it's funny, but like Stefan and I during the pandemic for Memorial Day 2020, I called him and I was like, "Hey, dude, I want to go record audio at every movie theater in LA because all the movie theaters are closed. And I think this is an insane moment." And I was like, I'd like you to shoot photos of those places. So we went and did it. And I wanted to do just like a visual essay using his photos, using all the sound that I recorded. And it was really eerie. Um,
what was like the what would the sounds be? This like you guys standing on the street?
Literally, I would stand at the ticket box office
Yeah.
and record audio for
Okay.
like 3 minutes at every theater, the New Art, ArcLight, all these places, the Egyptian, Man's Chinese. And and I just sort of lost steam with it. I started putting it together and it was like, I don't know, like a year later, I kind of put it together like and so I think things go away, but I feel like maybe on the 10, 2030, we're here, then maybe that project is really interesting 10 years later. So, but
Or maybe it's just part of the process. You know,
million
until you're
percent. I mean,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah, it's like yeah, you just did that because I always just think to myself like I've been doing photography for like almost 25 years now. Spent all this
yeah,
time like learning the craft, the
yeah,
technical stuff, learning the art, learning the history of it, and it's like there's times where I'm like, I don't have a personal project going or something. I'm like, what am I doing? I'm like, I
yeah,
spent all this time and I have
yeah,
this like talent or whatever, and knowledge of this thing, and I'm just like wasting it. And that's the
yeah,
thing. As I try to remind myself, it's like, just make stuff. It might not be what it might not go in my
yeah,
portfolio or whatever, but it's just like keep it moving. That's that.
yeah. I feel like that moment with Stefan, that was just, me making photos with a friend.
Hmm.
And we had an idea, and maybe we'll come back to it. But maybe what we needed to do in that moment was just feel connected to each other and feel connected to making something because there was no outlet in that moment.
Hmm.
And the challenge is you have this layer of guilt if you don't finish it or something doesn't come out. And I think the biggest guilt is when you have projects that you're building with other people and there's an expectation from them. My project that I haven't done, it's innately tied to a close friend of mine who I feel like I'm letting down, you know? And but I also know like at a certain point I need to buck up and do it,
And
and
it, but patience is a good thing too because I think we've also like turned into this culture of like constant like need to upload, need to keep the
yeah.
feed, like
Mm,
especially with social media, all
mm,
this shit, which
mm,
is like I understand it's like this weird balance of like yeah, feed the machine, I guess. But then at the same
Yeah,
token, it's like knowing when to like, I don't know, just sit on it for a while.
yeah,
I learned that from my friend Esteban Oriol, who's like a really great photographer in
yeah. Of
LA.
course, of
And
course. Yeah,
I mean, his whole body of work is basically his documentation of LA for like the last 40
yeah,
years. And he's like, dude, I
yeah,
just have stuff I have never even shown. And the same thing with the
yeah.
photos in your book. Like
Oh yeah,
they were sitting probably in your office for like the last whatever 25, 30 years, and now it's the time to
yes,
release them. And it has
yeah.
that much
30 years.
has that much more power to the work.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's the deal, right? Is it's like if you can be patient, you can find it. And I also think like with age, like the narrative comes to light. I definitely didn't intend to make a book that was like a decade. I was like the book was going to be like Hyro, plan, like skateboarding to Hyro, and there's like a lot that I did for Hyro. Maybe the most visible work I did for Hyro was after the You Never Knew, music video because I shot like Dell's album cover for Both Sides of the Brain. And that one's devastating because I can't find the originals. And it's like that photography for that is like actually it harkens back to all my early work. Um, and I shoot multiple music videos for them after You Never Knew in '98. But when Greg and I went through it and looked at the story, it was a decade story. Like 1988 is the year I go to skate camp and the year I have this camera in my hand and I feel a purpose. In 1998, the summer of '98, right? 10 years later is when I'm in Hawaii with Hyro. I would venture to guess that the dates overlap if I really went back, and tried to do that alignment. But I think you just kind of like part of that is just being open to it, right? Being patient and then like being receiving. So much we talk about as artists like trying to develop an antenna, right? Like, what are you listening to? Are you listening to the noise or are you listening to something deeper? And I think the problem is that there's so much noise and stimulation that it overwhelms, and sometimes that's what a collaborator can do is because you can get into these conversations. Sometimes that's what journaling can do is like just you kind of just strip away some of that shit, you put a pen to paper, you stop and you're not typing on your phone. You're the physical act of putting a pen to a piece of paper and not lifting it and going. It doesn't matter if it's gibberish, like you will get somewhere. I've never not known that to be the case.
Or for me, that's something I've been doing more of. I just did on Sunday.
Mm,
I just went out. I went to Boston and just like walked. I
yes.
didn't bring my camera. I just like
Yeah.
didn't do anything.
Wow.
And,
Wow.
and I realized like that's actually for me. It's like important because like going back to it, it's this constant like making stuff, uploading it, whatever,
Yeah.
da 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 da
Yeah.
da. And it's
Yeah.
almost you gotta like it's hard more and more nowadays just to stop and like take a minute and
Tell,
think about your thoughts, you know?
tell me, just tell me about that walk.
Yeah, basically I went to Boston. I live like 45 minutes south and I just kind of I was
No
like
camera.
no, I didn't even bring a camera. I had my
Okay.
phone, but I don't even think I took it. Maybe I took one picture on my phone or something, but it was like uh I was just sitting home kind of stagnant, this kind of nothing going on. I was like, I need to get out of my house and just walk
Well,
around.
no, but hold on. Take me through the thought. You're sitting at home. What time of day is it?
It was like morning. It was like 9.
Okay. And
And
you and did you feel like you didn't want to get out of the house that day?
nah, I mean, I think I had been in the house for like a lot of days and I had been
Yeah.
doing I mean, I got outside, but like I kind of stuck in my normal routine of like going to the same
Yeah.
places I go, like
Yeah.
whatever, going to the gym or like going to do
Yeah.
this and all and I realized like let me just go to Boston. It's 45 minutes away. I can walk around like
Yeah.
places that I don't go as often. And it was just like, oh, is this a great like refresher? Like, and I ran into some people I knew and this
Mm.
kind of
Of
because
course you did. Of
yeah,
course you did.
yeah. Some like
Of
years
course you did.
I saw
Yeah.
my friend Kyle. I grew up skating with. I hadn't seen him in probably like 10 or something years or like that, and just forced myself to get out of my normal routine and bubble.
Yeah.
And now I mean, I didn't make any work, but it was just like a good reset.
But it's the thing to me that I find is like there is like a very, very thin edge of where you make the excuse not to go to Boston and make the decision to go to Boston.
Mm-hmm.
And there has to be something in your brain that once you do that, it's like this sense of momentum,
Yeah.
you know? And I think that as a kid, I did not have that fine line. I fucking blew straight through that thing. I was constantly like, I'm doing this, I'm doing that, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But as you get older and develop your intellect and develop this self criticism, you know, that roadblock before you go is so hard to get past. So I would say that like you had like a huge victory, you know, personally, because that's the same decision of like, what I need to start my book.
Yeah.
You know, I need to make a folder. I need to start collecting the images. I need to, you know, do that. So, you know, that's a beautiful moment for you, particularly without your camera, because that's a conscious choice. And that's where you want to get to is like you can make conscious choices that support the subconscious.
And I think there's this idea that like part of the creative process, the only thing about creating is just like sitting in front of your computer and like, grinding and like editing or
Yeah,
or
yeah,
like whatever, building the
yeah,
business where it's like, no, that's like, sure, you got to do that, but like part of it is just like being a human. You know what I
yeah. I mean,
mean?
that's I get. I mean, you're talking about making photos with Stefan, you know, at the movie theater now, you know,
Yeah.
and make it makes me think that really what was at the root of that was like I needed to do that, you know, because I still take photos. I primarily, you know, make portraits. Whenever people come to my house, I bought a Hasselblad from a friend. His dad, he's the team photographer, Andy Kuno, an amazing photographer. His dad was the team photographer for the Giants, and it was his dad's Hasselblad.
Oh, is that
And
is his Instagram Punk Point or
yeah,
something?
Punk
Yeah.
Point,
Yeah.
incredible guy, just
Yeah.
beautiful human being. And so I shoot, you know, Hasselblad portraits of people, and then when I visit people, and when I was doing this skateboard, I was co-curating this skateboard exhibition with Mike Chernowski's daughter, Michaela. And whenever someone would drop off artifacts or whenever I would pick them up, I would shoot them. I would shoot them on 35. Actually, I brought my camera equipment here, but this is
Oh,
the
now you got a
my
black one. Nice.
yeah. And Vanasco sold me, you know,
Oh, yeah.
the portrait lens. And then I still shoot with my Nikon FG, this was my dad's camera.
Oh, that's the one that's in the book.
That's the one that's in the book, you
Yeah.
know. And I still have my Sigma fisheye. I couldn't, I mean, then the one thing is like all my fisheye photos are just like not sharp, you
Yeah.
know, because the focus on the Sigma is crap.
Yeah.
Um,
And
I I try to shoot, and then I have like a little Instamatic Minolta that I bring with me now. And then when basically it's just when I see people, I just want to shoot them. I don't shoot a lot of scenic things unless I feel something, and then I like to have that. But you know, and a lot like what I like to do is now with that Minolta is I don't take a digital photo. You know, I don't pull my phone out. I just will take one photo, you know, with the Minolta, and that feels like satisfying to trust what's in the camera.
yeah, definitely. And the one thing, so the body of work in the book where it's hieroglyphics,
Mm-hmm.
um, at that time, were you still filming skating, or had you kind of like stopped doing
Mm-mm.
that and then because how did you meet the hieroglyphics and start working with them?
So we used, you know, it would have been, you know, Mike Carroll and Sal Barbier, you know, starting with Javante. Everyone kind of like we all got Dell's first record, but I think, you know, Javante had like a demo tape that had other Hyro tracks and other Dell tracks. And that really intoxicated us. This is 91, 92. So we use a Dell song for Sal's part in the questionable video. And then we use this B side from Dell called Burnt, which is a Hieroglyphics crew track. And that's like, you know, I'm sure what happened was we asked Javante to ask Dell if it was cool because I think we had some engagement with Elektra, but they didn't approve it. Um, so we understood it was cool to use it, but like Javante was like gatekeeping this demo tape. So I like hijack the tape, copy it, and we make questionable using that track. People are like, that's crazy because it wasn't on a tape. It was only on a 12-inch. And then when it comes to virtual reality, I did all the music stuff. So I would talk to the labels, I would request stuff, I would do all the credits, I would shoot the album covers and all that. And I basically felt like I don't want to rely on Mikey and Javante for the Hyro music because the first video was a success. I want to go straight to them. So I hit up Dell's manager, Domino, and I hit up Jive Records. And I basically like asked for unreleased music to use. I got those tapes myself, used those songs. We used that Souls of Mischief song and Tony Ferguson's part in virtual reality. But what happened was we used a Dell track and a casual track. So, Mikey had, casual, Sheffy had Dell and casual. So we had all this unreleased Hyro music. Hyro goes on tour summer of 93 after virtual reality comes back, and everyone's requesting songs that aren't on the album. And they're like, how the fuck do you guys know about this? Jive found out about how successful the videos were. The management found out about how successful the videos were. And then that summer, this is me, like in classic Jake mode, Ken Block and Damon Way create Blunt Magazine, which was like their snowboard equivalent to Big Brother. And I'm like, let me do an interview with Dell. So I have my Rolleiflex, I have my camera. I'm mostly videoing at that point, but I go and shoot Dell. They put it on the cover, and I do this exhaustive interview with him. So like very similar to like the skate era with Mike Carroll Pro Checkout. Like I give Dell like a 8-page interview in the cover of this snowboard magazine. And his manager's like, who's this kid, Jake? Like he put our music in the video and now like shows and like, skaters are super loyal. So basically I was kind of similar to skateboarding. I was kind of a made man
Yeah.
when I met those guys. And then tragically, Mike Chernowski passes away. I use, some of their music in Secondhand Smoke for Ronnie Bertino's part. I'm and I stay in touch with them, and I basically like that summer of '95, I was like, I want to make a zine because I stayed in touch with them. I would say, hey, can I shoot a show if they were playing a show? And then I go to college in Boston, and they come out for a tour, and I'm like, hey, I'm in Boston, I want to shoot you. So I'd shoot that show. And then that summer I was just with my friend Alex from college, who was from San Francisco. We just made a zine, and the zine was like basically about Hyro and Board Stiff, two like rap groups that we loved. And I made a bunch of photos for that and wrote a ton. And then the internet started to grow, and I basically was like staff photographer. I wasn't really paid, um, but I was like, I want to be there. I want to be in the studio when you're recording, and I filmed video of that. I want to take photos, and it's sort of, again, it was just they saw me as someone who was eager, who did good work, but I wasn't like, again, I don't compare my photos to, I can't, like I look at my photos of them and they're so raw and they're like lacking this thing that like every hip hop photo from that era has. Like I think of all the album covers that I looked at and all the hip hop photography that I looked at, and all that stuff, like Danny Hastings and all that. It's like, oh my, I like don't even touch that shit.
But I love it because it's way more it's
Yeah.
different. It's more like
It's more documentarian
yeah, it's like
like.
very, very kind of vulnerable. Like you're this guy's
Yeah.
just like you're in with
Yeah.
them like in their apartment, and it's just
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
yeah. I think sometimes in photography, people think like I don't know if you ever had this in with filmmaking. Like people can get really bogged down with like the technical and
Dude.
the aesthetic
Dude, I
shit,
mean,
where it's
yeah.
and it can it's totally. But yeah, man, the work is great. Like, and I love the story in the book where you guys are like traveling around Colorado before Christmas and
Dude,
doing
that Arctic
shows. And the
Driggity and yeah, I
you
mean,
you guys are like in Utah driving back
yeah.
like on Christmas
Yeah.
Eve and you got all the guys to get out of the van and like photograph
Yeah.
the photos in the book and send like on side of the highway with the mountains in the back. But
Yep.
it was
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it again, like it's funny, right? When people go, what inspired you, right? And I could be like Herb Ritz, and I like have no photos that look anything like Herb Ritz's work.
Yeah.
But but the idea is that like you're looking at things that stoke you out. Like for sure, I looked at Danny Hastings' work and was like, "Oof," you know. I mean, there's so many amazing photographers from that era. And again, like if you took nothing else, took skate photos and hip hop photos from 88 to 98, that's insane. It's a wrap. Like so many aesthetics, so many different things. But I just never felt competent.
Hmm.
So like even when I would stage things, the Colorado outtakes are hilarious. It's like it's literally full, like 6 in the morning,
Yeah.
you know? But then there's that photo of A plus, like looking out at the horizon, exhausted in a profile. It's right before my self portrait in Boston for my 25th birthday. And that photo conveys like a loneliness. And it conveys a little bit of like feeling a little lost and a little tired. And, for me, that was like, I was pretty self abusive in college and was really depressed. And, that going to Hawaii to make that video like really gave me purpose. And so I made that self portrait on my birthday and on the roof of my Beacon Hill apartment. But that photo of A plus from that morning, he was pissed. They were all
Yeah, yeah,
pissed.
yeah, yeah. But it's so great.
They're
It's like you said, like it's only gonna happen. You ask the question, or and
Yeah,
like
I
take
was like,
the
dude, we
small
got to take
effort. Like it took like five, but now it's just like you're so grateful you have that photo. Like
yeah,
and it took that
yeah,
extra effort to get them out. And
yeah. And
yeah,
the outtakes on that roll are insane.
yeah.
Like it's just like, someone will be like, and then someone's like smiling and then someone's laughing and then Dell is just like, you know, it was so cold. Casual had a blanket on, like,
Yeah.
but it's
I can just hear them yelling like, Jake, hurry this shit up.
uh for
Or
sure.
I got a kick out of you and I think Dell or someone else.
Yeah.
You guys were
Yeah.
hiding beers from
Oh
everyone.
yeah, yeah, but Dell and I mean, so that was, while there's no words in the book, in the body of the flow of the photography, other than notebooks and, documents, I did want to include all the text of all the interviews that I did and all the articles that I wrote, because I feel like that really communicates like my voice in that era. And there's a little bit of that Chris Farley interview thing, like, hey man, that's cool. And you did that, that thing. And,
Yeah.
but they were so at ease with me. Those interviews are so candid, Dell talking about being arrested and, you know, um,
Loved video
but that,
games. Dell loved video games.
dude, but that was my connection with him. Like that was my job after I left Plan B, was I worked at Sega and I was like doing technical support on the phone,
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that. That seemed like a
Yeah.
interesting job working at Sega. That's like, was it like basically like the when Sonic the Hedgehog was like booming and all that?
Yeah, it was like when Sonic was booming, it was like Sonic 1 and Sonic 2. And imagine you're playing the Spider-Man game and you reach the Sandman boss and you're like, I can't beat him. And I was like, go to the fire hydrant when he's standing here and shoot the fire hydrant, then jump over. And so I would do that. And then they would just call and say, my Sega doesn't turn on.
Hmm.
And I'd be like, okay, so I want you to go to the back of your Genesis. Is it plugged in? They'd say yes. And I was like, now follow that cord to the wall and tell me if it's plugged in. And then the phone would hang up. It was like, okay.
Were you like a big gamer? Like, were you into
I
gaming?
mean, I wasn't a big, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't refer to myself as a gamer because it never dominated my life more than other things.
Yep.
But like the summer of '93, I finished virtual. I get a job as a contractor for Sega, but I'm also like a video game reviewer for Blunt Magazine. So I'm like getting free games from the video game companies. I mean,
Awesome.
dude, it was all like, how do I get the shit that I want? And like, that's, I guess, the theme, you know?
And you ended up going to Emerson College, which is in
Yeah.
Boston.
Yeah.
Best college radio station in the country. 88,
KCRW, or sorry, no,
88.9.
yeah,
Uh,
88.9.
What made you want to go to film school, and like what was looking back, was that like a useful experience for you? Like, are you glad you went, or what do you kind of take away
Yeah,
from it?
I think that, I think it was a necessary thing for me. I went to film school because Mike Ternasky and I talked about transitioning out of skateboard and snowboard videos to making movies. We
Oh,
were seeing what Spike Jones was doing with music videos. We felt that that was not out of reach for us, but we felt like we needed to have a little more like technical expertise on the craft of it. So after virtual, which was a really hard project emotionally and professionally for Mike and um, I was like, well, I'm going to go get my diploma. I'm going to go to film school. We'll edit the videos together. We'll make a snowboard video in one season. We'll make a skate video in another season. I'll get this education and then we'll team up and we'll make films together. And he died, in that process of, I'd been admitted into college, so I'd gotten accepted to Emerson. Um, but he passed. And I think that for me, when I look back on that time, I feel like it's like it was a real blessing to have that, because I went totally away from California, which I wanted. I applied to Cal Arts in Emerson. I didn't get into Cal Arts. I got into Emerson, so I went to Emerson. And I feel like I'm always going to live in California, now more than ever. And I just felt like the weather and the vibe in Boston was just amazing. And the intellectual aspect of the film community there with the Harvard Film Archive was like really incredible to unpack. But I think what film school did for me was two things. One, I got a technical education on how to use equipment and understand lighting and film, like technical equipment based learning. And the other more important thing was a philosophical and theoretical understanding of communicating film as a medium and as an art form. And so the depth of my professors, the work that I was exposed to, and the people that I met there really helped me understand that that was the trajectory of my life that I was excited about. You know, there was a filmmaker named John Cassavetes who I revered, to an extraordinary amount. His movies are very tough. When I say they're tough, they're just not always audience friendly. They're hard to watch, and they're hard to watch because they're super emotionally raw, and they're not like narratively based where like, oh, it's like a clear structure and, momentum. But I remember going to the Harvard Film Archive and seeing a movie that he made called A Woman Under the Influence. And there was a writer and Cassavetes expert named Ray Carney, and Ray Carney spoke, and I was like, it just changed my life. The way he talked about the work with the actors and all these things. And I think the same way, the process of making photos, you build it up in your head, and then the moment you do it, it kind of demystifies it. You know, um, Filmmaking is a similar thing. It took me, probably 10 years to really learn how to be present on set in the way that wasn't what I thought I should do. But I did a lot of work, and I had my Premiere editing system, and I was working for Adobe at the time and doing all this stuff. And, I felt like an outsider at the film school. I didn't get into the BFA program, which would have been like a fine art degree. Um, but I did like a directed study because I didn't get into the BFA. And, and, I, I was the only one who finished work. Everyone in the BFA program, they didn't finish any of their thesis films, and I finished my directed study thesis film. So I felt, but again, that's like total skateboarder. Like I was like, fuck everybody. I hunkered down. I had like an advisor, and I finished it, and it got in the Boston Film Festival after we shot You Never
I,
Knew.
I just love the letter. Like I'll go back to it again at the end of the
Yeah,
beginning, the first paragraph. You're like, yeah, I made a couple videos, questionable and virtual reality. We sold a couple units. It's like,
yeah,
but at that
10,000
time
copies
they're
of
probably
each.
like,
Yeah,
what's this kid talking about? They don't.
exactly.
They're like,
I mean, my like, I sent a demo reel, and it was like Danny Way and Rodney Mullen's parts from virtual that I edited.
Yeah.
Hope you think I'm worthy, you know.
Yeah. But this
But
goes to show.
Boston was great, you know. I did not make a lot of photos in Boston. It's a lot of like quick lifestyle stuff,
Was
drinking,
was
you know.
were you involved like the skate community when you were there? Like around that 98, it was probably did Roger Bagley have his shot positive when you were there? It was on Newberry Street.
Probably just after or just at the tail end, but I
Yeah.
didn't. I filmed with Panama Dan and Will Harmon,
Oh yeah, I know
and
Will.
I think it was like 96, 97. I did their 411 parts, and I used Hyro music for those. But I was filming in the big square across from the library, those brown ledges, and you know, um,
Because did you reach a point like you obviously made those amazing videos in skate? Did this kind of filming skateboarding wasn't creatively fulfilling as much as it used to be once you kind of got into film
well,
school?
I think that the challenge is I don't mean to say this in an arrogant way, but it's like I really liked filming with Panama Dan and I liked filming with Will because they were rad skaters and good guys. But like when you film, Rodney Mullen and Danny Way and Mike Carroll and Rick Howard, you're sort of at like the top of the mountain.
Hmm.
Um, I wanted to support those guys because I thought they were great dudes, and I just wanted to use more unused Hyro music, and I wanted to practice editing and make sure that I still had it. And but beyond that, it just felt like I also like when I making secondhand smoke was like really hard emotionally, and then I wasn't paid what I was promised, so I had a really big chip on my shoulder with skateboarding. I'm fucking I did my job. Like what the fuck, And that video was quite successful. So, I think it gave Plan B like a little bit of an extra breath, but I also learned to be like, well, I made that video for my friend and for myself. So if I don't get paid, it's not like I didn't get anything out of it.
And for you, like, did it kind of take you a while to find your voice as a filmmaker? And like, what kind of projects interest you these days as a filmmaker?
I mean, I think I feel, I still feel young, as a filmmaker. I still feel like, I'm fortunate that I'm probably starting to do like bigger and more substantial work as an older person, which I feel like that allows the work to have more depth and more resonance. I've done a bunch of these short documentary projects and, feel really proud of that stuff. Um, I do some really large scale commercial work, for automotive brands um, and that work is really challenging in a really positive way because so much of it is like very big budget, very high stakes in terms of what everyone's asking for, and you're really learning how to like politically navigate something and make art at the same time. And commercial work is disposable art, right? Like it's going to run for a year or not at all. Everything that you put into the moment might get completely dismissed when someone gives a note about what the brand needs. So to me, it's really about the experience on set and the energy of creating the work and the preparation that goes into the work. It's like all those things are the fulfilling aspect of it. Um, and I think the thing that's different with making photos versus making films, and I don't want to minimize other, but this is my experience, is that when you make a project that is like this final tangible thing that's multiple images or a story or this month of your life, and you sort of like you basically have to create energy to do the work, and then you're done with the work and you are just a little bit empty. And so I think like learning how to be comfortable with that, knowing that that's a part of the process, learning how to find the motivation to get excited again for the work when it comes again through, that's part of, I think, what I enjoy about the process. Um, and again, like, the museum exhibit I did in New York and the book, really the lion's share of work of the book was this last year. And then it was really in this like 4 or 5 month period of time in which I wasn't working, and which was really scary. But I was like, well, I got to chip away this at this book, and I did. Um, so the lesson there was sort of like you got to kind of make like the universe will open things up for you, a lot of times, we have these anxieties and these fears about a moment that's happening to us, and we really don't know the context of that moment when we're in it. But I was like super nervous about work and very concerned, as rightfully so, with a mortgage and a family and all that and a career. And I didn't know when I was going to get another opportunity to focus on the book and at that capacity. So I did. And then I finished the book. And then all of a sudden work came back and things got super busy. And I'm like, oh my God, I couldn't have done this at that time. But in terms of being inspired with work, in filmmaking, I mean, I haven't I haven't made a feature narrative film. And there's a book that I, have been um, slowly adapting by a dear friend of mine that I feel very guilty about how much time it's taken me, and I think I owe it to myself and I owe it to him to really get that done and make that a priority for 2025 and pour my heart into it. Um, I think that art is, one of the most important things that we have access to, and those of us who make art need to make more art right now, for sure.
Definitely. And is there anything you wish you learned earlier about directing, and especially, I guess, in terms of like, the commercial stuff you do? Like, what do you, what have you learned? Any kind of advice you'd give to a young filmmaker kind of starting out? Um,
Yeah, I was developing a project, maybe 10 years ago or 11 years ago, and it was looking like it was going to happen, and I was really intimidated um, about directing it. And what I mean by that is like what it like and but mind you, at this point, like, I directed tons of stuff. It was, I'm making commercials, I'm, making my feature documentary film, I'm working for big clients and all these things, and I'm like thinking to myself, what do I have to do? So I took a bunch of meetings with people, and this one person, shared this quote with me, which is a Mike Nichols quote. Mike Nichols directed The Graduate and Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Incredible director, writer, theater, stage and movie director. And he said, directing is like sex. You can watch people do it, but you really don't know how you do it until you do it. And um, it's so true, and it's the perfect analogy, because sex is an emotional and physical reaction to the moment, with a sense, with an energy that comes into it. And directing is preparation and understanding of the material that you have, and then absolute presence in the moment. So my advice to young filmmakers, would-be filmmakers, young directors, is that, you surround yourself with collaborators who bring out the best from you and who challenge you. So you basically help establish some guardrails, so the work itself is going to be good. And then what you do is you really understand the material that you're making, and you really try to listen to what it is that attracts you to that material, what triggers you, because it's only you. So you can't go, what would Steven Spielberg do? You could say, if you're really learned about Steven Spielberg and you're struggling with a shot, and you're like, what would Spielberg do? You could go, well, he'd start here in a close up, and then he'd dolly over here, and then he'd pan. The person would walk in, and, because he can take a single take and make 6 shots happen. So you can use that as inspiration, but you say to yourself, what do I feel? And the more in touch with your feelings that you can be with the work, the more resonant the work will be. And so really the secret to directing is admitting to yourself that you don't know everything, but you do know the material and what you like, what you think, what you have ideas. Maybe you've sketched out the shots and you know where the beats in the material are. And when there's a new beat, you have a new shot that emphasizes this moment that needs an extra emphasis. So it's really about just becoming conscious of what you want to put into the work. And then when you do the work, you just need to be completely dialed in, just completely present. No phones, no distractions. You're looking, you're listening, you're feeling. And in my experience, when you are absolutely present in the work and your actors are absolutely present or the subject is present, the right things happen. And the right things that happen might be different than what you thought that morning when you were having coffee, you know? But if you're prepared enough, then when that thing happens, you go, no, no, we can do this in a single shot and then that instead of that, we're good. You can make that decision to say, we're good because you prepared. And then that thing now is happening as it's happening. And then, so to me, to to be competent as a director, preparation is everything. Know your shots, know your coverage, know your story, know your tone, and then trust your actors and trust your DP. Like the actors are going to bring so much to it. A lot of times, in particularly in commercial work, you have this sense of the rhythm of the spot that you've been reading on the page. So you think the joke is like going to be a certain way or it's got to be a certain way. And then when the actor says it, they rarely are going to nail exactly what was in your head. They're going to bring themselves to it. So if you hold too tightly
Mm-hmm.
to this thing, right? It's like, you wanted to go shoot this thing at sunset and you go there and it's socked in and it's all clouds. And then you make this photo and in your head you were like, I wanted it with the sunset, but then you make that photo with the clouds and it's like, oh wow, I wasn't expecting that.
Being open, yeah. And
Yeah.
how do you when you're directing and this you're getting bigger,
Mm-hmm.
bigger productions with sets, it's a lot of people
Sure.
involved. How do you come?
Mm-hmm.
How do you command a set? Because at the end of the day, like you're dealing with narrative, you're dealing with people, you might be dealing with the client or whatever. It's a lot of different personalities. Like
Yeah.
how do you get in the mind frame where you can deal with everyone else's issues, but then also stay on task of what
I
you're
mean,
trying to create?
that takes a long time. That's one of my greatest joys. I went to summer camp as a kid, and sometimes if you're working in Hollywood and you have a really dialed crew, you just, you just don't have to do too much. But a lot of times, because of the economy of filmmaking in Los Angeles, you're working somewhere else.
Hmm.
So when I was working in Texas recently, and I was like, I got to be a summer camp counselor, and that's not a knock on anyone in that region. That's just the fact that shit's going to happen and shit's going to go sideways
What
if
do you
we
mean
don't
by that?
dictate.
What do you mean by that? You have to
So
be a
that means
counselor.
like like shit going sideways is like a department is slower than they should be.
Yeah.
So I have so much to do that I need every department working hard and working fast and working safely. So what I usually do every morning in the safety meeting, I give a talk. The AD comes in, he talks about all the safety stuff, and then he passes over to me, and I say, "Thank you all for being here. Um, I feel so privileged to do this for my job. You'll know me. You can talk to me. I don't believe that any of us is better than each other. I truly believe we're humans on this set and we are equals. The difference is if the work sucks, I'm the only one that gets blamed.
Yeah.
The other thing is when we do good work and we see it on TV, we feel great about it. And if we don't see it on TV and if we do good work and we enjoyed the process, we remember the experience. And maybe that rubs off on the next production and the next thing. And we create a different shape to working on set. Because a lot of working on set is like mindlessly running around. I don't like that at all. So my energy level on set, like exactly how I'm talking now, is how I talk on set. You can see me, you can feel me. I would say that. I'd say this is me.
You set
Sometimes I get
you set the tone early. Like
right away. And sometimes I like I'm not I'm not saying this in any way. Like I legitimately can get emotional giving the first day safety meeting talk
yeah.
because I really, 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 really feel lucky to get paid to do creative work with other people. And I also believe that the climate and the landscape of working on set in general is somewhat dehumanizing. So I feel for the people who, for the first time, are hearing a director even talk at a safety meeting. Because a lot of times people go, I've never had an experience like that. And I go, okay, good. Like you should feel human. You should feel appreciated. And so my big thing is I want to work fast, not to the point of not being safe, but like let's dictate a pace and we're not going to waste our time. Um, and then the other thing is just in terms of just kindness. Um, I just believe like I never raise my voice on set. Uh, I don't talk down to anybody. And what I learned is that if I stay in control and my measured voice is consistent, no one else on set has the ability to snap or go crazy. Because if the director is calm and collected and talking in a calm voice and talking to a PA, asking their name, shaking their hand at the end of the day, like
It,
it just is like, and because then I think the thing that people forget is if you have a tone and an energy that's kind of aggressive or sharp, you've lost the edge of your knife. Because if I all of a sudden, if we work great and everything's human, and I'm like, hey guys, we need to fucking go. For the next 30 minutes, we got to shoot this and we got to get into our next setup. I need that. Please. Thank you. Everyone's like, great.
yeah.
But if I'm always yelling, at the end of the day, everyone on the crew is like, fuck this guy. We're going to get overtime.
Yeah, that's the weird thing about production. Like I worked as a photo assistant for like over 10 years and you work on and it's the cool thing about production, like every campaign or whatever you work on, the crew's different. And you're like for like a week,
Yeah.
you guys are like
But it's the
together.
same. It's different, but the
But
same.
it's different, but the same. But it's like if you just came off some job working for some asshole, you're still in that
Oh,
mind.
dude.
You're still in the mind frame of like, oh yeah, last week we were with the shit crew. The guy was a dick or
Yeah.
whoever.
Yeah.
The lunch sucked and all that crap. So
Oh,
it's
yeah.
like if you set the tone early and think basically what you're saying essentially is like think of others first to help you
Yeah.
accomplish your goal. Like I was at the airport recently and
Yeah. Yeah.
they lost my bag. And there's some other people they lost their bag or whatever. And the person in front of me just went ape shit. Like this straight out the
Yeah.
gate. I'm like,
Yeah.
that's not how you solve your
No.
problem.
You
So I
can't, yeah.
yeah, I actually was
Can't put the
really nicer.
toothpaste back in the tube,
So
right?
I get up
Like,
there, I go there, he was like, man, that guy's a real jerk, huh? And then there's this nicer, got my bag back. She like texted me, and it's like, yo, read the
yeah.
room and think about others before, and then you can
Yeah.
accomplish your goal.
I mean, look, dude, that's the times that we're in. It feels so good. It's so like, it's so, dude, it's like eating bag of Cheetos to be aggressive.
Yeah.
It's like, rah, ah. And it's like, it just completely decapitates the moment. It's that thing with kids. My wife taught me because I have very sweet parents, but my dad was really intense and could yell, just take your head off with you. God damn it, Jacob, blah blah blah. My wife is like, what does that do? If you yell at the kids, what does that do in this moment? Do you think it helps them listen to you, or do you think immediately they close off and shut down? It's like, okay. So, I've taken so much from her because she's very different than me. Um, but that's the lesson I think in general is that like, and and I think the other thing is it has to be genuine. And if you're not an outspoken person, I mean, I think certain crafts or certain disciplines of directing require different energies, right? Like commercial directing is it's a bit more like, dude, we got to get 22 shots today, right?
Yep.
Feature film directing, I think you're going to be with the crew every day, so you don't have to do all that legwork every day.
Yep.
TV work a little bit more similar to commercial work, but that's I think my advice is just learning how to be authentically present and having an energy that can motivate the crew and a presence that allows you to execute the material.
Yeah. And hopefully have a good time. I want to enjoy
I
what I'm
mean,
doing. You know what I
I
mean?
always do.
Yeah.
I'm always like, as hard as the hardest days have been, I always like, I always drive to set myself. Um, I don't trust PAs uh, to drive me with kids when they're like, who knows if they slept last night. Um, but we listen to music on the way to set, and then we listen to music on the way home,
That's good.
you know?
A couple more questions. I'll get you out of here.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's all
Uh,
good.
w- One thing I really appreciate about been following you on Instagram now for like a little bit, and you're very open, man. Like you're very
Mm,
you're open to like talking about like what you're going through in your own life,
yeah,
be it mental health stuff or even
yeah.
like you've been on this new like kind of like health journey and
Hmm.
everything. And like I love the updates. You're like cycling with your dad every morning and
Yeah, yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
But like,
yeah, yeah.
what's your kind of relationship with social media and what makes you want to kind of like share on there like you have been doing?
I have learned, I mean, first of all, I think I've been very blessed in my family to be a strong communicator, in the way that I grew up, in the way that from my own trauma and my own understanding of empathy and what I worked on the most with my therapist was what we would refer to as an authentic presence. That the goal in many situations is to have an authentic presence. And what an authentic presence means is you don't have a hidden motivation in the moment. You're actually like listening and participating and being active in the moment. And then you can bring yourself authentically to that. And then what comes out of it is not being manipulated or there's not some like hidden agenda. So I think I've developed and cultivated a sense of an authentic presence that I strive for, imperfect, of course. But I think with social media, you know, um, I was an early adopter on Instagram. I got so much incredible feedback about my archive and loved that and all the attention that that gets. And I have, very personal things in my past that I've, been open to discussing. And I have, I learned that if I share those difficult things out loud, the abuse that I suffered when I was a kid, um, my own, bouts with depression, you know, um, understanding what it's like to be a creative person and have self doubt and self loathing and imposter syndrome and those things. What I learned was that over time, whenever I shared something like that, every single time I would have a note in my DM that said, "Thank you. I needed to hear that." And I remember, I think it was the first time I ever shared about my abuse again, and I didn't do it in a way where I was trying to grab attention. I felt like it was important to say it. I think there was a moment where people were being more honest than they'd been historically on social media. And I posted something and it didn't get a huge amplification. I think it was around the time the algorithm changed on Instagram. Um, and there was a really high volume of people that came into my DMs. And what I know is that the the thing that we all need is to be able to let these things go that weigh us down. And I think I've learned and cultivated an eloquence in terms of talking authentically about my emotions and how I feel. And as time has gone on, and I think from 2016 to 2020, it was a very raw and emotional time in this country. And I felt like I was on my own journey and it felt good to let some of those things go, not to get attention, but to tell other people who I knew were like me that you're not alone.
Yeah.
I feel and trust that the majority of creative people have trauma, um, have guilt, have self doubt, um, have depression hovering around them at all times. And if I am being true to my sense of presence and my creativity, then I sort of feel like if I have this gift of being able to talk about it from an authentic place, that I'm only motivated by sharing, by telling you you're not alone.
Hmm.
Maybe I should. And I'm cautious because I don't want to be a person that, presses record and every day I say something. But what I tried to do was when I have something that I feel strongly about, then I'm going to verbalize it and post it. And if it's really a thing, it's going to be permanent. If it's not, it's going to be on the story, and then it's going to go into a mental health thing where all that stuff is there. And I think that we have to learn to destigmatize these things that we're uncomfortable talking about because they do stack up, and they build up on us. And then now look, like this era that of photography that makes up this book is like rife with this kid who's like, coming into touch with his trauma and like feeling insecure and not knowing what his identity is and all these things. So, I understand that like art is created in these moments of tension very naturally. And that's a beautiful thing that can happen. But I know I'm not an aesthetic guy. Um, so my grid is not going to look like Stefan's grid or your grid or, all these image maker grids. And I just was like, the only thing I have is me. And whenever I've shared from an honest and truthful place, it's helped at least one person. And that's the mandate now going forward is like, I'm, I just want, I want to be honest about what I felt. And I think, yeah, yesterday morning, I felt really overwhelmed. And I've been in therapy. I've talked about it. My wife is a psychologist. And what you learn when you feel overwhelmed by the world and the enormity of it, you make your world small. And that's not to say you ignore things. It's to say you focus on what you can control. You have kids, focus on your kids. You have that. So when you focus on your kids, that means you measure your tone. You're not going to talk about stuff that's going to fuck them up, right? They're too young, because these moments we just say things. So anyway, so that post yesterday was just about make your world small, make it something you can control, and then integrate discipline and
No,
hold yourself accountable. So yeah,
no, I really appreciate it. And yeah, because it is hard like sharing stuff, but I think then you realize like whatever you're feeling, other people are feeling the same thing. It's the same thing we have in common as like being a human being.
yeah,
I know for
yeah,
myself, I like 10 years ago, I had a real problem with drinking. I quit drinking
yeah,
10 years ago. And
yeah,
I knew I had a problem for a long time, but
yeah,
I couldn't admit it to myself or admit it to like my family. And then the moment I
yeah,
did, I finally told people I was like, "Hey,
right.
I got a problem, man." I was like, because you feel like I don't know, if it's like shame, like you're like a failure or whatever.
Shame for sure,
Yeah, and you're
for
like,
sure.
fuck. But then I got that weight off, and I was like, and then I moved forward, and thankfully,
Beautiful.
yeah. So I appreciate that, and like the stuff you share, and like the stuff, especially with like your health journey and stuff. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
everyone struggles with that stuff too, myself as well. So
yeah.
it's kind of
I
it's
mean,
um I'm not
this,
worried. I'm not at your level where I can share my journey yet like that as
you don't
open,
have to,
but I appreciate it, and like I like you said, I
yeah,
think a lot of other people do too.
yeah. I think that's that thing, right? Is like if we look at other people and appreciate their strengths, it doesn't mean that we have to emulate them. I definitely am not trying to do that so that other people go on their stories and say things because they think that's what they should do.
Hmm.
I'm actually trying to do that so that one person asks for help.
Yeah.
Maybe they ask for help from me, which has consistently been happening. And I will support people who are asking for next steps on their journey. But just to know that we're not, I mean, dude, it, we feel alone. Creative people, but I mean, everyone does, but we're
Well,
talking,
me and my brother talked about this yesterday. People are more disconnected than ever before because it's just everything's like on text and that's just how we communicate. Like back in the day, like you think about like the photos in this book. For you to
yeah.
meet up with your friends, you had to call them on the phone
Oh,
and like
100%,
there
dude.
was
My
no
phone
text
was
message, all that
crazy.
shit.
Yeah.
Whereas like now it's just
Yeah.
like we're all just like it's like we communicate more than ever, but then at almost less, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
weird. It's a weird time.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, look, communication has created an ability. I have a really close friend she lives in Dubai. I can WhatsApp her, I can call her, I can message her, like, but in that case, I feel very connected to her through that,
Yeah.
but then connecting as a human, doing those things like that, going back to the Van Asco,
Yeah.
movie theater shooting, like it takes effort,
Hmm.
and the world is so fast and so consuming. You feel like you don't have effort, you don't have the bandwidth to do that stuff. But I think that saying things out loud is one of the most important ways to get back to yourself, and writing it too, a lot more than I used to. I mean, I have my journals
Yeah.
um, in the book, which I felt like is super important because it kind of lets you into my creative, moment. But, sometimes when you can't have a conversation with someone, you need to write it out so that at least it's not weighing on you. It's not like, you know,
Yeah.
have that outlet.
Well, Jacob, I guess just to end it, what's next for you, man? Obviously, you got the book coming out. Anybody wants to purchase it? I think you said
Yeah,
I'm gonna post it. I think this episode's gonna come out November 14th, so by then you should be
beautiful.
able to buy a copy. But I guess
Yeah.
what's next for you, man? Anything part
I
of the
mean, I go, I have some commercial work that I'm doing in December. I mean, right now, like the pre-sale goes up. I self-published the book.
Yep.
So I paid for it all myself, and I'm hosting it on my
Badass.
website, and I'll be shipping it with my family. And I will say that anyone who buys on the pre-order, I made these little postcards of
Dope.
some of those key frames, that were in the book, and I'm going to throw postcards in there for people that pre-order. But I just I think for the end of this year, because I self-published and I'm self-shipping, I think my life is pretty full,
Yeah.
doing fulfillment and connecting with people about the book. I have an opening show at Heavyweight Gallery on November 22nd. So that'll be amazing. I'll probably do some signings
Is that Los
in a
Angeles?
couple. Yeah,
Heavyweight?
that's in LA. Yeah,
Okay.
Heavyweight, HVW, the number 8.
Okay.
Um, and that'll be on November 22nd. And so I'll promote the book through the end of the year, and hopefully sell. I only made 1,000 of the standard edition. I made 143 of the collector's edition, and hopefully I can sell a good number of those, and then
Yeah.
feel like I've put this work out there, and then shift my focus on to the next thing.
Well, Jacob, thanks so much, man. I really appreciate you taking the time and congrats on the book.
Thank you, Alex. Thanks for having me.
So there you have it. That was the Jacob Rosenberg interview. Just want to thank Jacob so much for taking the time to come on the podcast. It was a real pleasure talking to him about his new book and as well as his journey with filmmaking. Just an incredibly talented guy, and also just like a really good person. Like if you follow Jacob on Instagram, he's just like a really open person. Talks about this kind of what's going on in his life as well as projects he's working on and much, much more. So it's a real honor to get a chance to speak with him. And if you would like to pick up a copy of his book titled Right Before My Eyes, it's available today. I'm going to put the link in the description of this episode. So let's click that link. You can purchase a copy. And also, as I mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, with today's episode, if you enter the promo code BANTER, you'll get 2 months free of the PickDrop image transfer tool. All you got to do is go to pickdrop.com, enter the promo code BANTER, and you'll get 2 months free. Thanks again, and see you next week.